Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're jumping into a really compelling argument that honestly suggests the global economic order has already been flipped upside down. This all comes from a counter-analysis that pretty much challenges the entire story we've been told about who's really on top.
And it all kicks off with what seems like a really simple question. But trust me, the answer is anything but simple. In fact, how you answer it completely changes your entire view of the world economy. It's really the key to this whole analysis.
And right here, this is the heart of the whole debate. If you use the traditional metric, nominal GDP, then yeah, the G7 bloc of Western nations looks bigger. But, and this is a huge but, if you switch to what's called purchasing power parity, or PPP, which basically measures what a dollar can actually buy in different places, well then the BRICS-plus group isn't just a little bigger, it's way bigger.
All right, so let's dig into this first big idea. Why does this one metric, purchasing power parity, totally flip the script? How can it single-handedly change our understanding of who holds the economic high ground?
I mean, just look at these numbers. They are pretty stark. When you measure it this way, in PPP, the BRICS-plus economies have already blown past the G7. And this is in some forecast for 2030. The argument is that this is the reality right now. The economic center of gravity has already moved.
And to put that into perspective, think about this. 41%. That's the BRICS-plus slice of the entire global economy. So, according to this analysis, to just dismiss this bloc's importance, well, you're pretty much ignoring a massive and, frankly, still growing piece of the whole pie.
And the author does not pull any punches here. The argument is incredibly blunt. When you hear that Western institutions are showing remarkable resilience, the author says that's it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. You're focusing on the fine china while completely ignoring the iceberg that's dead ahead.
Okay, so this huge economic shift is not just some abstract game with numbers on a spreadsheet, right? The point is that it's happening in the real world. Right now, you can see it in these rapidly expanding trade networks that are, for the most part, operating outside of the traditional Western-led system.
And here's the proof in the pudding. We're talking trillions with a T in trade, a massive jump in things like rail freight, huge investments happening within this block. And what all of this creates is this kind of self-reinforcing economic ecosystem that is actively and intentionally bypassing the old-school trade routes.
So, the big takeaway here isn't that these nations are just buying into some anti-American narrative. It's way, way more practical than that. They're making a simple, rational economic choice to trade in their own currencies, which lets them avoid the risks and the costs that come with using the dollar system.
All right, now we're getting to what might be one of the most significant claims in this entire analysis. The idea that what we're seeing isn't just some temporary blip. No, it's a structural, systematic move by central banks all over the world to get away from holding the US dollar as their main reserve asset.
And look, this isn't just one strategist's hot take. The analysis actually points to Bank of America, a pillar of the Western financial system, which has noted this very trend. This goes to show that even the big mainstream institutions are seeing a major shift away from US assets.
This timeline really shows you just how fast this is all happening. We're talking about foreign central banks dumping tens of billions of dollars in US treasuries in just a couple of months. Holdings at the New York Fed have hit a new low. In fact, this is the biggest drop we've seen since the crazy market crisis back in March of 2020.
And here's the really crucial part. The infrastructure to get around the dollar-based SWIFT system, it's not just a proposal anymore. It's real, and it already exists. You've got systems like BRICS-bridge, Russia's SPFS, China's CIPS. These things are operational right now, and they're processing billions in actual transactions.
So, okay, when you take all this data, the trade flows, the currency shifts, the author then turns to directly confront the opposing view. This is the idea that all of this is just information warfare, right? A battle of stories and narratives, instead of something rooted in hard, cold economics.
So which is it really? Is this whole thing just a big contest of messaging, information warfare? Or is it a case of what the analysis calls economic gravity, that irresistible pull of faster growth and new, better infrastructure? The argument here is crystal clear. At the end of the day, economics, not words, are driving this entire shift.
And this data really throws a wrench in the idea that one type of political system is guaranteed to give you better economic results. I mean, you look at China and India, totally different systems, right? But both are growing like crazy. And then you look at democracies like Germany and the UK, and their growth is,
Well, it's basically flat.
So what this all suggests is that the real common thread for success isn't about political ideology. It's about the economic model. The countries that are seeing this incredible dynamic growth are the ones that are adopting these new economic policies, and it doesn't seem to matter what their system of government is.
Okay, so finally, let's get to the conclusion. Because after laying out this whole case for a fundamental economic realignment, the author doesn't just stop at critique. They actually propose a path forward for the U.S., framing the choice not as, how do we win a messaging war, but as how do we make the necessary structural adaptations to this new reality. So what's the recommended path forward? The argument is that the U.S. should forget the PR and focus on concrete, market-based solutions. What does that look like? Well, it means things like pursuing new currency deals to bring down dollar costs for everyone. It means seriously investing in infrastructure to actually compete on a global scale. It means rebuilding manufacturing capacity back home. And finally, it means hedging against the dollar's potential decline.
And this is the final, really powerful idea that just wraps the whole thing up. Economic gravity ultimately trumps narrative control. The thinking is, in the long run, real stuff, real production, real trade, real growth, that's always going to win out over any attempt to control the story. So the real question isn't how to win an information war. It's whether the West is ready to adapt to a world that, according to this analysis, has already changed.